Hello lads and lasses, it's Gizmo, and welcome to the first official episode of our Baldurs Gate 3 series. Today we're going to be looking at all of the officially released races in Baldurs Gate 3. However, before we do that and get into the meat and potatoes of this video, we're going to go over a few quick things. The first is that racial attributes are no longer active in the officially released Baldurs Gate 3. They got rid of them. In pre-release, you had racial attributes. Now, your racial attributes are based off of the class that you choose. So if we go ahead and we take a look at this, you can see we have an elf, and we choose a barbarian class. And then if we go over to their stats, you can see the 17 strength, 13 dexterity, 15 con, 8 int, 12 wisdom, and 10 charisma. If we change that, you can see that all of those stats change. If we go bard, cleric, it doesn't matter. Those stats change. And if we go ahead and we take a look at something like their abilities, where you would normally choose your skills, you can see that you actually assign the bonuses. The +1 bonus that we have, the +2 bonus that we have, those are now assigned by you instead of by the race. This is great because it allows you to not restrict yourself to the race that you have to go for the certain class. Now, it doesn't stick to the true D&D 5e fashion, but it gives you a lot more playability for the characters that you have. And I think it was a good decision to give you the more playability, to not restrict you to those races and the classes that you have, but it does take away from that like D&D feel. But I think all in all, that's probably a good thing that they've done. Now with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what each different attribute does. We have Charisma, Wisdom, Intelligence, Constitution, Strength, and Dexterity. Charisma, Force of Personality, improves spellcasting for bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks, influences traders' prices. Next you have Wisdom, Senses and Intuition, improves spellcasting for clerics, druids, and rangers. And then Intelligence, Memory and Mental Power, improves spellcasting for wizards. Constitution, Stamina and Physical Endurance, affects your hit point maximum. Next is Strength, Muscles and Physical Power, affects your effectiveness with melee weapons, also determines how far you can jump and how much you can carry. And then last but not least is Dexterity. This is your agility, reflexes, and balance, affects your effectiveness with ranged and finesse weapons, also affects your initiative and armor class. Now, the biggest things that you need to take away from this is that your Charisma, Constitution, Strength, and Dexterity change some of your actual stats other than just your ability scores. Your Charisma influences trader prices, your Constitution increases your hit point maximum, your Strength is how far you can jump and how much you can carry, and your Dexterity is your initiative and armor class, and also damages finesse weapons. Those are things to take into account when you are building your character. So if you want somebody that has more jump or more carry capacity, you want more strength. If you want more health, you need more Constitution. And if you want more dexterity, more armor class, you need more dexterity. You know, and if you want to change your trader prices, choose your charisma. It's kind of given the ability for wisdom and intelligence to be more of your dump stats because they don't do anything super special. Now, the next little bit that we're going to go over is actually going to be what advantage and disadvantage mean. So advantage and disadvantage means that you're rolling 2 dice instead of the 1 that you see. So if you had advantage, you would roll the 2 dice and you would choose the higher of the 2 numbers. If you were to have disadvantage, you would roll the 2 dice and choose the lower of the 2 numbers. We're going to see that a lot in these races where there is advantage and disadvantage given to some of these races for different things. Now the next little bit is that Githyanki were actually an added race and were not in the original D&D 5e. They were actually added in later on with the addition of a book, so they weren't an original playable race. Also, your half-orc, your half-orc, gnome, and dragonborn weren't in the pre-release versions of Baldurs Gate 3 either, but have since been added as the official release. Now we're also going to go over proficiencies and what exactly proficiencies mean. So as we can see from this table, these are the experience points which might not line up with Baldur's Gate 3 but do line up with D&D 5e. But you can see that for level 1 through level 4 you get a proficiency bonus of 2, 5 through 8 you get a +3, 9 through 12 a +4, 13 through 16 a +5, and last but not least 17 through 20 a +6. A lot of these races are going to allow you to add your proficiency bonus to different things, and that's going to be super helpful to keep in mind when trying to essentially min-max your character. Do you want a ranger? You might want to choose an elf that has like longbow proficiency. You add your proficiency bonus to your hit roll, so if you roll an 18 it's a 20 to hit. It can put you over that little bit that you need to beat the armor class. And then last but not least, we're going to go over Cantrips and Spells. Now these are a little bit easier, but we're going to go ahead and just choose something like this is for a bard. So at first level he knows 2 cantrips, which means cantrips are spells that you can cast without using a spell slot. You can cast them as many times as you want throughout the day, and a lot of these races are going to give you cantrips as well. You can also see that you have first level spells. You have 2 first level spell slots, which means that you can only cast that first level spell twice before taking a long rest to reset your spell slots for the next day. It's really important to know which classes have spell slots and which races give you cantrips, so you're not kind of you can mix and max your cantrips and you're not reusing the same cantrip because the race already has it and the class gives it to you as well. Now let's go ahead and get to the meat and potatoes of this video. All the different races. You have Elf, Tiefling, Drow, Human, Githyanki, Dwarf, Half-Elf, Halfling, Gnome, Dragonborn, and Half-Orc. The Gnome, Dragonborn, and Half-Orc were the 3 races that were added after the official release of the game. So the first race that we're going to start with is Elf. The Elves have a couple different racial features. The first one is going to be base movement speed of 9 meters per turn, which is pretty much the standard across the races. The next feature that they have is Elven weapon training. You have proficiency with the long sword, short bow, and long bow. And then proficiency, again, provides a bonus to the associated rolls, making you more likely to succeed. That's that proficiency bonus that we just talked about. Next, they have dark vision, which means you can see up to 12 feet, 12 meters in the dark. It's done in metric, not empirical. The last is Fey Ancestry. You get advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep. So again, we're seeing that advantage that we talked about being played out in an actual race. This also has, because of the Barbarian, you have a strength proficiency bonus. Now, you have 2 different sub-races, the High Elf and the Wood Elf. They're pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that the High Elf gives you the Firebolt cantrip. That's going to be your main damage dealer for something like this, because it goes 1 through 10 fire damage at low levels. The Wood Elf has a feature called Fleet of Foot. It gives you 1.5 increased movement speed, so you would have a max of 10.5. This allows you to get into fights quicker or out of fights quicker. So if you want to choose somebody that can run away, like an archer, or if you want to choose somebody that can get in, like a monk, barbarian, or anything else. Now, the next race that we're going to go over is Tiefling. Tieflings have quite a few different sub-races, but let's go ahead and take a look at their features. 9 meters per turn, dark vision up to 12 meters, which is pretty standard for anyone that has dark vision, and then hellish resistance, which means you have resistance to fire damage, taking only half damage from it. And any resistance that you see, such as poison resistances or anything like that, you take half damage from that type of damage that you're getting. Now, if we go into the sub-races, you have Asmodeus, Mephistopheles, and Zariel. Asmodeus gives you Produce Flame, which is a cantrip that you just naturally have. Next up is going to be the Mephistopheles Tiefling. This gives you the Mage Hand cantrip, and after that you have Zariel Tiefling, which gives you Thaumaturgy as well. So each of these has a different cantrip that it gives you, and that also gives you a different spell at 3rd and 5th level, which is very helpful for having free spells. The next one is going to be Drow. Drow used to be a subclass of Elf, but at the official release and in this game, they've made it their own actual race. So they have 9 meters per turn, base racial speed. They also have Drow weapon training, which means you have proficiency with rapiers, short sword, and hand crossbow. And then you actually have superior dark vision, so this gives you dark vision up to 24 meters instead of the standard 12 meters. And just like Elves, they have what's called Fey Ancestry, so you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep. It's the same exact thing as the Elves. Now, the Drow actually do have 2 sub-races, the Lawful Sworn and the Saldarian. They are the same, and the only difference is maybe it has some effect in the later game if you were to choose one over the other, and there might be different choices down the road, but there's not any difference here. Now, next up is the basic human, the 9 meters per turn, and then they have Civil Militia. So Civil Militia is weapon proficiency with spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives, and armor proficiency with light armor and shields. And then next up, they have what's called human versatility. So you select an additional skill to be proficient in. Your carrying capacity is also increased by 1/4. Now this adds a little bit of a bonus to the humans, because the humans don't have many racial differences. They're just pretty much standard humans. So being able to have a different skill to be proficient in is quite helpful, and it's kind of their like bonus thing. So you can see they don't have any sub-races because they're just humans. Next up is the Githyanki, which is the race that was added later on in D&D 5e. They weren't a base race, and they actually have a very direct influence on the game. So one of the cool things is they have Astral Knowledge. It's a gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. So if it's Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence. And then they also have Githyanki Psionics, because they are a psionic race. So you get the Mage Hand, and then at 3rd and 5th level you get other spells as well. That will be taken a look at later down the line. So base racial speed, and then is 9 meters a second, and then you have Martial Prodigy. So you have armor proficiency with light and medium armor, as well as proficiency with the short sword, long sword, and great sword. So they're very great at being a very martial class up and close. Next up, we have Dwarves, and there's a couple different sub-races of Dwarves. But first up, they have a movement speed of 7.5 meters due to their short, stubby legs. Up next, Dwarven Combat Training. They have proficiency with the Battle Axe, Hand Axe, Light Hammer, and Warhammer. Then the Dwarves actually do have a Dark Vision up to 12 meters as well. And then last but not least, they have Dwarven Resilience. So you have advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance to poison damage. Again, another advantage on saving throws and another resistance. So now the sub-races are Gold, Shield, and Duergar. So you have Dwarven Toughness for the Gold, which means that your hit point maximums increase by 1, and increases by 1 every time that you gain a level. This is great for creating a beefy dwarf. Up next, you have Shield Dwarf, so you have armor proficiency with light and medium armor, and then the Duergar. Each of the different races, the standard races, has a Duergar or a deep person race, sub-race. They actually have the superior dark vision and Duergar resilience, so you have advantage on saving throws against illusions and against being charmed or paralyzed, which is very helpful, and again, it's another advantage that a race has. Now, the Duergar and the deep races is pretty standard for like humans, elves, dwarves, and halflings. They all have that kind of like, I forget what it's called, but it's a deep race essentially. So next up we have half-elves, and we're going to see that again in the half-elves as well. So they're kind of like a mix between elves and half-elves, and they give you the bonuses of both without any real negatives. You have the base movement speed of 9, you have Civil Militia, which comes from the humans, you have Dark Vision, which comes from the elves, and again Fey Ancestry, which comes from the elves as well. Now, they also have the sub-races High Elf, Wood Elf, and Drow Elf. Again, they have that deep race. And they give you the same thing that the High Elf, the Wood Elf, and the Drow Elf give you. The Drow Elf just gives you Dancing Lights cantrip, which is very nice to have. Again, there's not really anything special about these guys. They just kind of mix the humans and the elves together and give you the best of both worlds without really any of the negatives. And you can see you're kind of just missing out on the elven weapon training, but that's pretty much the only thing you're missing out on. So it really depends on whether you want the humans or the elf as your weapon training, and you just take a look at whether you want Civil Militia or if you want elven training. Up next we have halflings though, and they're basically just half a human, but they are their own separate race, and they're not even close to humans, but they get the base movement speed of a dwarf, which is 7.5. However, their other racial features are great. You have Lucky, so when you roll a 1 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die, however you must use the new roll. So this can take you from a natural 1 or a failed save to a natural 20, or a passing save depending on how you roll, but you have to take it, even if it's worse. Or a natural 1 again. The next is Brave, which is another great one. You have advantage to saving throws against being frightened. There's a lot of enemies in this game that can frighten you, so having that is kind of a wonderful thing. Now you have two different sub-races. You have Lightfoot, and then you have Strongheart. Lightfoot means you have advantage on stealth checks, so you can play a class like a rogue, and you get advantage, or you can play a class like a ranger, and again, advantage. And then you have Strongheart, so you have advantage to saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage, which is kind of the same as a dwarf. It's like a dwarf halfling hybrid, but again, these original racial features are wonderful racer features and should not be discounted. Up next we have Gnome, the first race that was not included pre-release. They have 7.5 base movement speed and then Gnome Cunning, so you have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. This is a wonderful thing because it helps against saves on something like being charmed or something like being, I think it's paralyzed. Paralyzed might be constitution, I might be wrong about that, but it's wonderful to have because it gives you those saving throw abilities. Now if we look at the sub races, we have Rock, Forest, and Deep Gnome. So again, you have that deep sub race. They get Dark Vision and Artificer's Lore, which means you get proficiency bonus to history checks. The Forest Gnome gives you Speak with Animals, and again Dark Vision. Speak with Animals is great because there are some animals in the game that you can talk to, and they'll give you different like bonuses or advantages or tell you certain things. And then Deep Gnome, you get the Superior Dark Vision, like most of the Deep Sub Races have. You also get Stone Camouflage, so you have advantage on stealth checks. So again, a very, very stealthy race that you have here that would be great for any kind of like rogue and or archer that you want to play as. The next race that we have is Dragonborn, which is the second race that is newly added, and I absolutely love these guys. They're gorgeous and they're glorious, and I can't wait to make one in my game. They do have the base movement speed of 9, which is pretty standard, and they have a ton of different sub races, but each one is a different color. As you can see, we have black, blue, brass, bronze, copper, gold, green, red, silver, and white. Now these are glorious creatures, and I love that the way that they've been drawn up. Now they get breath weapons, so this one has frost, this one has frost as well. Red has fire, green has poison, gold has fire, copper has acid, black has acid as well, blue has lightning, brass has fire breath, and bronze has lightning. Now these also come with their Draconic Ancestry, so whatever your breath weapon is, you get resistance to that damage type. So if it's lightning breath, you get resistance to lightning damage. If it's fire breath, you get resistance to fire damage. Now, one of the great things is poison resistance. Now, last but not least, we have the Half-Orc race. So these are the last of the 3 races to be added into the game after the official release. You can see they have the standard movement speed of 9, the Dark Vision, and Relentless Endurance, which means that if you reach 0 hit points, you regain 1 hit point instead of becoming downed. So if you're at 1 hit point and you take 12 damage and you would go to negative 11, instead of that, you go right back up to 1 and you continue fighting. So if you have a health potion or any kind of healing, you can heal yourself after that. Now last is Savage Attacks, which is a wonderful, absolutely wonderful feature for an up-close fighter. So if you land a critical hit with a melee weapon, your damage dice are tripled instead of doubled. So if you find a weapon that gives you crits on 18s to 20s, you can absolutely murder with your weapon and do triple the dice damage. So these are all the races and a brief breakdown of all the races and kind of an in-depth review. And the next episode, or the next video that we're going to be doing, is going to be a breakdown of all the classes and possibly all the subclasses that are added into the official release. I hope you folks have found this absolutely helpful and informative. And remember, if you want to keep up to date on all of my videos, hit that like and subscribe and the bell notification to be updated when I come out with new ones. Have yourself a wonderful day and enjoy playing the game.